to The Truth Will Not Be Silenced, the show that allows people to be seen, to be heard, and to be human. I'm your host, Melissa Woodfork White. In today's episode, we will talk about logistics industry employment, the warehouse, with my husband, Nathan Whyte. Sharing our stories allows us to encourage, inspire, motivate, uplift, and help people. There will be a special surprise at the end of the show. Be sure to listen all the way through for the details. Our returning special guest today is my husband, my hubby, Nathan Whyte, who is happily married to me. Nathan is a transportation, logistics, and supply chain executive. He was born and raised in England. He is a proud graduate of Forest Hill Boys School in London, Sydenham College in London, and Birmingham University in Birmingham. Nathan holds multiple certifications in logistics and transportation supply chain worldwide. He has over 33 years in the workforce, bringing forth his expertise in business and logistics. He is the co-founder and owner of Whyte Warehouse Connection, LLC, providing the best business and education products and services. Nathan is going to share with us today about the logistics industry, employment, the warehouse. For the warehouse. Hi, Nathan. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello. I'm glad to be back, everybody.
All right. Let's go ahead and jump right into the first question. What are some characteristic traits? We're talking about characteristic traits. What are some characteristic traits needed to be a transportation, logistics, and supply chain executive? For example, the ability to see the big picture, adaptability, calm under pressure, executive problem-solving skills, honesty, continually seeking improvement, proficient in project management, able to manage and release stress. Take it away.
Right. The first thing you have to do is look at oneself internally. That's the first thing you got to do. You got to look at, identify your own strengths, your own weaknesses, and look to develop. You fine-tune your strengths and you develop your weaknesses and you make them strengths. So that's the first thing you do. You look internally. And once you've looked internally, you've found out what your strengths and weaknesses is, especially at executive level, you have to then become very, very strong in managing people and personalities. It's a big trait. You have to learn how to manage people and personalities. Years ago, it was a different aspect of how they were managed. You used to have when I was starting out, it was more a sergeant major attitude. You know, it was sergeant major attitude, and, you know, people used to be managed in more of a fair entity, you know, and they were managed through military style. They were managed through fear, but now you have to manage them through praise, you know, in their accomplishments, in their wins. You praise them in their wins, and when they're not producing the wins, that's kind of like coaching and development in how to produce and get those wins. Depending on what grade you're going into in these fields, you have to have certain qualifications, have certain training. You have to look at things from an open mind, the bigger picture. You have to have a global insight into things, because no matter what part of the world you're in, the supply chain aspect runs the same way. It's basically a product that you want to get it to the point of sale very quickly to make a turnover and make a profit. And even before you get to that stage, you have to source what the product is you want to sell, or if you want to build that product in-house, you still have to use supply chain and warehousing to get it to the source and the point of sale. You have to be able to work under pressure. Things change very quickly, extremely quickly. You could have something planned on a day of this is what today's going to look like, but when you actually go to your place of work, you find out that your trucks are not going to turn up on time. You find out that your suppliers are not coming in on the day they're supposed to come in.
Your workers,
are not there. Your staff members are kind of short. So your working day your plate becomes fuller than what you can eat. So you have to spread out work. You have to develop a new strategy.
So delegation is a character trait that's important to being an executive.
That's right. You have to be able to delegate. You have to be able to move the posts a little bit to the left or to the right. You have to be able to strategize. Your strategies have got to be able to change, at the drop of a hat.
Plan and execute right?
Yeah, you're planning. You have to be able to change your plans very quickly. If I was to say, you have to know every single position in what you're doing, how it works, how you put the pieces of the jigsaw together. And when things or the tires come off the wheels, how do you get some low profiles? You might need some faster wheels. Yeah, you need to look at everything in a business sense from start to bottom. And you've got to look at profitability and efficiencies. If it's not running efficiency, it's called continuous improvement. If it's not running efficient, how do you make it run efficient and more efficient still moving and forecasting in a year's time? So you've got something now that you're working with, it works well, but can it work better? Is there something on the market that you could purchase to make it work better? Is your staffing that you have, do you need to open a position for a specific member of staff in your team to help you develop those efficiency processes?
I love the fact that you touched on the adaptability piece, the calm under pressure, effective problem solving skills, continually seeking improvement. Can you touch on a little bit about proficient in project management and tell us what that is as a characteristic trait needed because you are an executive?
Right. Project management is when you have a project at hand or you have something that is being developed, you have to be able to manage it and get it to its fruition in a time scale. That's basically what it is. If you're going up to what's the right word I'd like to say, CEOs on that level, vice presidents, they may come to you and say, right, this is what we need to develop, and we want it done within 6 months. And we need all these people in these positions. We need to do this, that, and this is how we want to make another. We project that we should be making another 2 million. And this is what we need to happen in the warehouse for that to happen. We need this getting out or loaded here, and this. They need to produce so much more per hour of this, and so forth and so forth. You have to plan all of that, and you've got to. Not only do you have to plan, you have to know what the value amount is.
And not naming any names, you were the director of a warehouse for a big company here in Arizona. Can you tell us about those character traits, a specific project management where you guys had to pick up, unload, deliver, or so forth in the warehouse?
I think to be specific, is when you have loads that come in and are going straight out. Items that you're going to recycle for sale overseas. That's another big one. You have a lot of that needs to be sorted through, needs to be packaged right. Containers turn up and you have to load them, you weigh them in what they're worth. You have to learn out what the money amount is because you're going to have so many of them coming in a month. You want a certain tier weight going on the back of that inside that container, and then you can develop how much money you're going to make totally. So when it's project management time, you need to be able to get the project up and running, and it starts making financial sense immediately.
So when we're talking about project management in the warehouse, we're talking about the products that are coming in, the products that are going out, and for the specific entities that they're going to or where they're coming from. Is that correct? Like, for instance, if there's a lot of donations coming in, that's a project within itself.
That's right.
When you're collecting those donations and then you're having to send them out to the various entities that will receive those donations, right?
That's right. That's right. And sometimes when you're dealing in project management, you have sponsors. You have sponsors that give you stuff for free. They sponsor your business entity. They might provide $500,000, dollars worth of product that you can sell into and sell for double the price. You have business sponsors, and when you have business sponsors, they sometimes come and be a part of your project management team because they want to see how you're using the product. What more can they give you that could not only benefit sustainability, support sustainability, your business venture, but not only that, how can they become a part of that project management to develop their business as well? They like to align themselves with you because you're a bigger business and have their name on your website as a partner. So that also addresses sales and business for them. This is like a partnership. So it's that side of the project. It's a very big piece of it as well. Everybody working together in tandem. You're working as a team with other businesses in that project management. You have business sponsors and business partners.
In addition to the characteristic traits that you just shared with us from your own career and being an executive in your field, how do you manage and release stress? Because that you just shared with us about how you can have a plan and then how drastically that plan could change upon your arrival at work and all of the factors that contribute to that change. So how are you able to manage and release stress?
Well, that's releasing the pressure. You have to have something that can kind of like open the pressure cooker and release the steam. Because
what do you do?
Well, I tend to walk. I tend to walk around the warehouse or walk around the facility, or take a 15-minute break in the office and listen to relaxing music. And that's the way I kind of, because when you've not all that noise around you and you have that peace, you tend to think straight and you think out a plan a lot better. With persons coming and asking you 20 or 30 different people and asking you 30 different questions, your mind can't think in 30 or 40 places at once, and they're all asking you different questions and wanting different answers at the same time. So you need to take yourself away and prioritize what has to get done first before you move on to the next stage for the other things to work. You can't go to the end piece of the jigsaw and expect the part of the jigsaw you should have the 10 pieces of the jigsaw you should have put in first and expect that things to work. It won't. So you need to take yourself out of where you are and kind of like focus and relax. You need to find something that relaxes you. So some people, they use those stress balls,
the different shapes and stuff.
Yeah, some people, they kind of like work the perimeter of the warehouse and they just get thinking about it because there's nobody around. So they can walk and they can kind of like listen to music and so on.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of your characteristic traits and you being an executive. So for this show, we're specifically talking about the warehouse. Can you tell us the difference between transportation and warehouse? Because they're two different things.
They're two different things. They work in tandem sometimes. A lot of the time, they always work in tandem. The difference between transportation is actually transporting a product to either a place of sale, or to a different part of the country if it's depending on what it is. If it's we're talking about warehouse, it's basically some sort of a product. That's the transportation side. That's just the moving wheels. It moves things about. The warehouse is where the product is either stored, Okay, it's stored in preparation to be sold or moved on to somewhere else. It's a vast storage space. They're a little bit different from a factory where something's made. There's a difference between a factory and a warehouse. They both look the same, but they're not. A factory is a manufacturing site where they make a product. They can also store the product there, so it does two different purposes, and then they move it on.
But specifically in the warehouse,
it's just a place of basically mass storage of different product.
Where you're moving it either in and out, or you're doing both of them in the warehouse.
Right. You can have one side of the warehouse for delivery, one side of the warehouse for receiving.
So with that being said, what are the requirements to being employed in the logistic industry for the warehouse? And when I say the requirements, I'm speaking specifically international, federal, and state laws, regulations, licenses.
Well, if you're going in that management level, I'd have to say probably a degree business. You have to have knowledge of OSHA regulations. You have to have knowledge of fire regulations for the state you're in. Okay, Arizona, you have to have fire regulations because you have fire marshals out here, and they dictate what sort of, safety requirements are needed in that warehouse, along with OSHA. If you're using any equipment, like forklift trucks to move items about, you need to know that the drivers need to be trained, they need to be certified, and they need to have retraining every so many years, and they need to have intermittent training, or maybe every 6 months they have certain training. And if they have an accident in one of those items of equipment, what's the recertification process look like? You need to know knowledge, you need to have knowledge on that as well.
So specifically, give us an example about you being the director of the warehouse and you had several people that were in your charge. So you had people that were on forklift, you had people that were sorting, tell us about those different aspects within the warehouse. You also had supervisors, you had managers, and you had senior managers. Tell us about the different areas of the warehouse that you manage. You talked about the forklift. I know that there's some sorting and some other things that are going on.
Right. First of all, you'd have your pickers, your packers, and your sorters.
All right.
Right. Your sorters are okay. Say like you have a consignment that comes in. Those are the people that receive. Some of it is gonna be stored in the warehouse. That's inventory. So your inventory has to be checked off against paperwork to make sure that the numbers are correct. Because that if the numbers ain't correct, there's gonna be discrepancies. You may well have to turn a load away because you can't take it, or you may well have to get on to the phone with a manager, etc., to say, hey, we've ordered this much, only so much has arrived. Are you sending the others behind? We have to change this for paperwork. Send us some new paperwork because we're not going to accept it like this. So you have the inventory coming in. You also, that's done with the inventory side of things. Then you have unloaders.
Okay.
They will take the product, and they usually use forklift trucks or they use pallet trucks and so on. They'll take the product off a vehicle in either palletized form, which is shrink wrap, gaylords or whatever. That's another type of pallet that holds product, and they'll move it to a certain part of the warehouse. Okay, and then it will go in for storage, and a forklift might pick it up and store it away. So those are your loaders, and then you will have your pickers, packers. They're your sortation stuff. They'll sort things, break stuff down, sort it out.
What's good, what's not good, where's going where.
What's going where. It's what you call, sometimes it's an order that comes in. They'll look at an order and say, right, we need to break this down. We need so much of this, so much of that, and they'll pick and pack. And they'll shrink wrap and do that sort of process, and they'll label. And then you basically have the stuff that go through wastage.
What about the reloaders? You said you had unloaders that when inventory and stock and stuff is coming
Right.
in, they're responsible for unloading it. So
Right.
now that you have the pickers and the packers,
Right.
then you would
Yeah,
have
that's
the
right. So that will be going out for dispatch.
right.
And you've got the dispatcher, and they will just take the finished product and put it on the vehicle that's going to deliver it to either a store or to a business or whatever the case may be. That will be their particular job. They'll be checking off, making sure they have the right amount of consignments, the right amount of pallets that are going on. So if you've got 26 are going on this trailer, or they've got 15 going on that trailer, or whatever the case may well be. So and then they would then reseal a trailer. A driver would come and sign off on his paperwork, check that the seal's correct. And they may even go to a gatehouse and they'll double check it as well. Gatehouse will check that all's correct, and they'll leave. And then
You were talking about the other aspect.
yeah,
It started with an S.
yeah, you'd have the sorters, and you'd have the pickers and the packers.
You already did those, but before I asked you about the reloaders, after the pickers and the packers, you were gonna talk about salvage.
Salvage. Right. Okay. So when we're talking about salvage, we're talking about items that may come back in from an area that they say is not good, not good enough for sale. So when you're doing salvaging, you're trying to salvage, see what's there, see what's salvageable. Can you sell it in bulk onto somewhere else? So it's now going to be sold onto a third-party vendor. It might not be in the same country. You might be overseas. It might be in a third country where you can make a dollar amount selling it somewhere else. So now you're going through all the salvaging of what you got left, and you'll make consignments according to what you can sell. Some you can't sell, will go for recycling. You send it to a vendor that has been probably shredded, destroyed. And so basically what I'm saying is there's nothing that ever really goes to waste. We try to keep everything out of the landfill. We don't want nothing going to a landfill as much as possible. So we take all the resources out of the product before it gets to the landfill stage.
So as you were sharing with us about the requirements to be employed in the warehouse, you talked about some of the federal, state laws, regulations, and licenses. Can you tell us a little bit more about OSHA?
For
the warehouse.
OSHA for the warehouse is all about safety.
What are they looking for?
Well, they're looking for requirements in the warehouse. How wide is a walkway? How much space should you have from the size of say for instance a loading bay? Do you have, is there as the fire marshal coming in, have they put sprinkler systems in there? What does that look like?
Is the floor safe?
Yeah,
like safe for moving, packing, and all
what's the signage like? Do you have,
what about the lighting and also
it's lighting, ventilation.
What do you call the strips on the floor that tell you which way to go?
The one way, that's signage. That's one way, and so on. What about your signage? Do you have adequate sanitation and so forth for the number of staff you have? You have to have, do you have evacuation policies in place? It's depending on how much staff you have, you may have a requirement for more. It's mainly the same thing, but more of. It's all about the safety in case of evacuation, in case of this scenario happens or that scenario happens. And
the ventilation too, right?
Yeah, ventilation. Do you have the safety? The safety is a paramount concern. If a fire breaks out, do you have sprinklers that are going to put that fire out quickly? Can you get the people out the building quickly? Because when you have those scenarios, obviously the fire marshal is going to come in. You're shut down until the fire marshal comes in and they says you're clear to go.
So can you give us, thank you for that, Nathan. Can you give us, you touched on about the licenses for being employed, like if you're a forklift driver, can you tell us a little bit more about that certification? How many hours? What does the training look like? What do they have to do?
Well, there's two types of different training. You can have site training, which you can take away and only use on your site, or you can have national training, which is a different.
Tell us about both.
Well, the national training, there's certifications which are involved, that costs money. more money, but that you can take to another. It's a nationally recognized certification.
So you can go anywhere, any state.
But there's internal training.
It's just for their work.
It's just for their work location.
You can't take that
any one of
anywhere else.
their locations within that business.
Right, but you can't take it somewhere else.
So that basically is you're trained. You're
what do
assessed.
they do? What are they trained on?
Well, they train you on safety. If it's on a forklift truck, you have to be able to operate the forks correctly. You have to pre-trip the vehicle correctly and know how to, if there's any defects, how to record those defects and go to your supervision to put in work orders to have those defects put right. You have to be able to operate the vehicle safely as well. Remember, these forks, you don't operate those forks, you could cause a serious injury, if not a fatal one. So you have the initial training, and then they'd probably be looked at every 6 months. They'll go through like an assessment every 6 months, but they'll have a proper recertification every 3 years. It's a complete whole recertification training every 3 years. And if they have any accidents, then they have to be recertified all over again.
So they have to redo the training.
Yeah, they have to do it all over again if they have an accident.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was definitely about to ask you, give us an example of a forklift accident and walk us through what happened and then the follow-up.
Where they knocked over a set of, they backed into a set of what I call gaylords. It's like crates standing up, big ones, and they knocked them all over the floor. They must have fell about 10 foot, crush into the ground. And so because of a lack of awareness and not proactive looking behind him, that's the only way you're going to hit that, is look behind him. He had to be dismount off his forklift and retrained straight away. He couldn't operate a forklift truck until he'd gone through retraining. Then
do they get disciplined or anything like there? Is there a write-up process or something?
Yeah, we have
that it goes in as a warning or something?
Yeah, it goes,
because
it's documented.
It's a safety issue.
Yeah, it's documented.
Okay.
It's documented. It's documented. They do go through a disciplinary because of the nature of what happened. The whole set of the galos collapsed, and we were lucky that there was nobody walking underneath those galos. It would have collapsed on top of it. So it was still a write-up because of the nature of what happened. If we'd have just bumped one Gaylord, it was the only Gaylord, and just moved it back, that wouldn't have required.
But because they all came crashing down, it was so 10
high,
feet, high.
So kind of that was a different ball game altogether. So they go into retraining. We discuss with them what went wrong.
Were they given probation after that?
What happens is they get that they're not supposed to have another anything like that.
Okay,
over
a little
period of time.
Okay.
So and they watch the video. We have video cameras where we show them what they did wrong. That's a good thing. Video camera, we can replay it and show you, look, this is what you wasn't doing. That's why that happened. Because you wasn't.
So what's the purpose of the videos in the warehouse? Is that for security and safety too?
It's for security and safety.
Okay.
It does two. It performs a lot of levels. It's security, safety. Yeah, you can pull the video cameras. You can have a look to see where, and also productivity.
So those are just in the warehouse. It's not in your office, right?
No.
Okay, just in the warehouse.
Yeah, it's just in your warehouse.
I have to ask because it's your field.
Because in the warehouse,
I'm learning as I'm talking to you. I've learned a lot, but I'm learning more as I'm talking to you. So you're saying that accidents are taken very seriously in the warehouse and the steps and consequences to it, along with the retraining. So you just don't fire somebody, you give them an opportunity to correct their mistakes, but at the same time, you have to monitor them to maintain that safety. Is that right?
That is correct. We've got to monitor them, and we've got to watch the things that are in place, safety things that are in place. They get continuous training. And if, for instance, they do have their accident, there's a process that's already at hand that they have to follow. It's continuous improvement to make sure they don't have any more accidents. And if they do, what are the steps beyond that point? I mean, we do keep a close eye on things. We use video cameras to watch and let them watch where they made some mistakes and how those mistakes, are preventable and it shouldn't be happening again. So it's just preventative training, training going forward, safety management and awareness and management of their own space while they're in that apparatus operating in the warehouse, and plus safety of others around them and forward thinking about the safety of others around them.
All right. So really quick, tell us about a time where you worked in a warehouse as a director of warehouse, not transportation, as the director of warehouse, where the warehouse was out of compliance and you had to work to get it in compliance with OSHA.
It's more so with the walkway. There was a walkway that was a little bit narrow, and we had to readdress and redesign that walkway so it was wider. So the spacings are supposed to be 3 foot from the wall. The walkway is going to be about 3 foot wide, and it wasn't 3 foot wide. So as you can imagine, most of the warehouse had to be checked to make sure that we was aligned with the OSHA's regulations.
Well, all right. Well, thank you for sharing those requirements to being employed in the warehouse and all of the information about federal, state laws, regulations, and licenses, including training and accidents. Thank you for sharing that, Nathan. Final question. How does sharing your story today help others?
It's to help others to be aware of their surroundings in a warehouse and to be safe. And if you see something that looks like it's going to be an accident or something that doesn't look right, report it. Don't wait for somebody else to report it. You report it, because you could be saving somebody's life.
All right. Well, do you want to give them the information on how they can contact you, or do you want me to shout it out?
Oh, you can shout it out.
So if you would like to contact Nathan Whyte, you can email him at info@whitewarehouseconnectionllc.com. Once again, you can email Nathan at info@whitewarehouseconnectionllc.com. You can also check out our website at www.whitewarehouseconnectionllc.com. Once again, our website is www.whitewarehouseconnectionllc.com. Be sure to check us out. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us again, honey. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having me once again.
Next week, we'll continue to discuss and have conversations about real experiences, personal and professional, stories that need to be shared, seen, and heard that makes us human. The truth will not be silenced. To be seen, to be heard, and to be human. The surprise. If you like or leave a positive comment about this show, you will get a shout out. This includes businesses, products, services, organizations, and events. We want to specially shout out Tyreek Wynn of Wynn Productions and Tanika Walston of Integral Hair Affair for leaving us positive comments about our show. Thank you all so very much. Thank you, Tyreek, and thank you, Tanika. Following the link in the show notes lets Buzzsprout know we sent you and help support our show. Buzzsprout is the best way to launch a professional podcast. Want to ask a question, be a guest, or subscribe to this podcast, The Truth Will Not Be Silenced? Click on the show link. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.